arduous cases. They take a long time to develop a real credible case for human trafficking. You get a lot of insight into the social media aspect, the computer-based aspect, how human beings are sold on the internet. At that time, it was a little different than it is now, but basically the premise of human trafficking and how people are brought into the life and then how they are basically used and abused is the same.
Detective Miraglia. Or do I just call you Mike Miraglia now?
Miraglia.
Miraglia. I thought it was Miraglia.
No, it looks like Miraglia because it has the G in there. But it's
Miraglia.
Italian, and so the G is just for decoration.
Miraglia. I have been calling you Miraglia.
That's all right.
Do I have anything in my teeth from my lunch too? Like
no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, no, you checked them. I see that.
Okay, fantastic. You were a detective in the city of Boise for a long time. Mm-hmm. You dealt with some dark stuff, including human trafficking. You are a legislative chair for the Fraternal Order of Police, and I actually just spoke with Representative Chris Mathias about cell phones on school campuses, and we're essentially the world, the nation, and Idaho is no exception, is kind of embroiled with this great tragedy of social media and the damage it's doing to young people, and unpacking that for people and helping them understand how dark this rabbit hole really goes is a difficult thing. You have firsthand experience with this. And so I asked you to come in to talk about it as not fun as it is, but it's reality. And there are things happening on social media that are horrific, that are the worst of the worst. Why don't you just go from there?
Okay, so it's a pretty broad topic. I'll give you a little background. So I been a detective with the Boise Police Department. I retired last year. Spent about several years in the middle of the 20-teens, basically 2013 through 2016, working as a gang detective. And the main focus of my work as a detective was human trafficking cases. I worked hand in hand with our ICAC, which is our Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and one of our members on the department who was part of that task force, Tim Brady. And basically, we went after human traffickers. We decided that this was an important target to go after, to try to help, to try to do the right thing. Because we understood from our trainings and past experiences that this was something that was prevalent throughout the United States. It happens in all parts of the country, and it's a devastating situation for victims of trafficking.
So taking that I'm sorry, you were just taking a breath. Keep going.
Yeah. So basically, what we did was we started building cases, and you know. I always put law enforcement, cases to some level of skill and some level of luck. Basically, you need both of them to do well. And so we applied ourselves to it, and we were able to develop several very successful cases against human traffickers from the region, from the area, from Boise, and we were able to, in essence, rescue some victims of human trafficking at the time. And in the process of doing those cases, which are very long, arduous cases, they take a long time to develop a real credible case for human trafficking. You get a lot of insight into the social media aspect, the computer-based aspect, how human beings are sold on the internet. At that time, it was a little different than it is now, but basically the premise of human trafficking and how people are brought into the life and then how they are basically used and abused is the same. And so social media changes over time in terms of the platforms, some of the angles, some of the ways that money is transacted, but generally it's the same thing. And it's given me a deep sense that social media is not your friend. It is not the wonderful thing that we thought it might be 20 some odd years ago. And there's good parts to it, no doubt, but there's also that dark side.
Yeah, whatever we thought it was going to be. Like, I remember when I got Facebook in 2004. Like, I was at Cal. I was on the rowing team. We had some like dumb rowing team Facebook group, and I was like one of the officers of the group. I was a senior at the time, and I don't even think people at least younger consumers like I was, really conceptualize what this was going to be. I've heard people talk about very fondly at the time when it was coming out. They're like, oh, we were going to connect people. We were going to like reunite families. We were going to do all of these wonderful things. We're going to share information with people at an unprecedented level. But along with that came all of the other human interactions that we know. I mean, you good people and then really, really bad people. But catching the really bad people in a virtual setting is infinitely harder. At least that's what I've been told. I've never been in law enforcement. Is very hard, and it also, that world also offers a lot of opportunities for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to play in the game.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I think early on it was something where, you know, like I used Facebook back in the day to connect with family in another part of the country, to see, you know, a picture of somebody's birthday, things like that. The things that we as adults were like, oh, I can use this for this. I can send notes, and everyone in my group, in my friends really, you know, knows what's going on in my
like
world.
Friends.
My friends, I give the quotes, and there's a reason why.
Right. Like,
so that's the way
different.
It started out. It was supposed to be people who were actually your real friends. And then it evolved, in my opinion, into everyone is your friend, because everyone wanted to boost their friends. They wanted to boost their social network. And so you start being friends or friending people, and we've all been through this, I think, by now, who are not your friends, who you don't really know. And then after you friend them, you don't really communicate with anyone after that anyway. So what kind of friends are those? You know, they're not real friends. They're Facebook friends, or they're friends in social media. And so it's become part of the culture. And as it became part of the culture, of course, our kids want to be part of that culture too. It became acceptable to have social media friends instead of real friends. And that's where the rub comes in. That's where the difficulty as far as social media goes and human trafficking. Because it is very easy for someone to reach across the internet and touch your kid in a communication way. They can reach across and they can say, hey, I'm such and such, let me be your friend. And they're not coming across as, I am a deep, dark, evil predator who's going to destroy your life and you know, basically sexually abuse you. They're coming across as someone who they might be pretending, based on what they're posting online, as another 12-year-old, as another 14-year-old, as someone in their social group. Or perhaps they're posting as themselves, but they're putting on airs that they are someone you should want to be friends with, someone you should follow, someone you should want to connect with. And so it's a dynamic that kids are getting involved in. We're human. And so we as human beings do operate in a social network. We operate in a tribal way. It's in our DNA to want to have a social group that we are connected to, that we feel attached to, and that we protect, which has fantastic pluses in the world, but it also has a lot of negatives as well. And we see tribalism in a lot of different ways, everything from, you know, in terrorist organizations all the way over to others. So we see all these different things, the pluses and the minuses of the dynamic. For social media, it just makes that platform, it makes it more accessible to predators. It makes it more accessible to traffickers to be able to try to entice your kid over into their corner, to try to develop that control. It doesn't happen only through social media, granted. There's, you know, I'm sure on your cast, you've talked about sextortion cases.
Yes.
You've talked about, you know, internet crimes against children where they'll have kids pose you know, sexually or do things sexually that they then take and sell. And there's a huge network of that occurs on the internet. And for that reason alone, personally, I would ban any of that in my house. That's a straight up no.
And when you say you'd ban any of that, what's
from
that?
My kids? I would not let my kids are not on social media, period. There's no reason for it. They have real friends. They have real people. They have real life. You know, they can go outside and they can play. They can meet kids in school. They can relate to people individually and directly. Right. They don't have to do it through some, you know, some internet-based platform. Given that, as on the trafficking side, when you're looking at your victims of trafficking, there's a lot of things that go into why they are there, why they are seeking the attention of individuals who might then want to traffic them. It could be curiosity, but it also could be a lot deeper and darker issues that a child is dealing with. And so from that, it's not, and I'm trying to find a way to say this clearly through social media. It's not just that this person reaches in, finds your perfectly well-adjusted 12-year-old and entices them into the life. It's also, there's a part of it where your 12-year-old, when your 12-year-old was younger, there was some abuse, there was something else going on. I find in my conversations with trafficking victims is that we have trained them in society to be victims. We have trained them to have low self-esteem. We have trained them, and I would say almost all victims I've ever talked to had some level of abuse or something going on in the home earlier. And that's not blaming every parent of every human trafficking victim. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a lot of ways that kids are victimized, whether the parents know it or they don't know it. And we all know those physical examples. We've all discussed them on the news, from counselors to different things like that. Uncles, boyfriends, whatever the
neighbor, whatever it is,
name whatever it is, but they're pre-sexualized to move in that direction, and that's a sad thing. And then with that, with all those struggles that those poor kids and those parents had to deal with to get those kids past that, now you have this new platform that allows some stranger who has ill will to reach in and tap on that part of your kid who needs the attention, who needs someone else to build up their self-esteem. They need someone else to support that, and that's where the kids become targeted. That's a big place that we see when we see kids who are victimized, who turn into adults who are victimized, by the way, because they all, generally most of them, grow up, but they retain all those issues if they're not dealt with. And so in the process of growing up, you don't want to have a circumstance where now you have this extra world that they have to satisfy to feel like whole kids, whole teenagers. You have all these other expectations in social media that don't help any, in my view. Specifically to trafficking, we see enticement for trafficking on social media sites, everything from Facebook over to Snapchat to Twitter, less so. More gaming platforms are being used that way. Hookup platforms are big, skip the games, that kind of thing. I know there's individuals, I've talked this in classes, like, hey, skip the games is one of those where you're going to see folks who are, they're likely trying to be involved in trafficking in some way. And there's always one hand goes up, well, I met my wife on Skip the Games.
Wait. What's Skip the Game?
It's another one of those.
Does not sound like a Christian dating site or something.
No, it's not. It's a hookup site.
Okay.
And so
I didn't know that existed.
I'm sure there are examples of dating sites that, ended well, but there's plenty of other examples where it doesn't. And I'm not picking one site versus the other. To me, it's all blanket. It's all the accessibility of an individual to be able to manipulate online. It's another way for them to reach out and touch your kids, basically. Now, there's more to it in terms of once you get past the enticement online, the ICAC, the internet crimes in terms of visuals and that kind of thing. There's the actual physical connection there. Where folks are trafficked physically. They're physically moved around the country. They're physically, basically sold for sex. And then the whole other aspect of labor trafficking. It's a little different in terms of how they utilize that. And each area of trafficking has kind of a little different approach to it. So ultimately, there is a physical side to this beyond, the initial, that the basically the engagement on human trafficking on social media to get to human trafficking. So there is the physical side too of, a 10-year-old who is enticed to meet with some guy who's 35 years old in the parking lot, to have sex, or that person travels to the kid's, state or city to do that. But there's also those who are teenagers who break away from the family. They isolate themselves from the family to meet up with someone who they feel is, fulfills their need for attention. And so that's where that dynamic starts to begun in person. And so there's an aspect to that. So it goes beyond that point, but it certainly is the starting point, in my view. It's not the only starting point. There are others, and people, they don't like to use the word prostitution, but the old saying is it's the world's oldest crime. and it was the oldest crime way before there was social media, obviously. This is just another platform, another avenue for folks to victimize, for folks to bring a child or a teen or an adult into an area where then they can exploit them.
Okay. There's a lot here. Thank you for all of that. Let's say I'm a parent. I am a parent. I got 3 boys. And let's say I don't know a lot about this. So there are multiple stages, right? Which is the kids are, and there's a lot of legislation and a lot of information out there about that. The fact that kids are mixed with predatory adults on social media is not, as some people would say, an accident or an unfortunate byproduct. A lot of people articulate that that's actually a feature of the app, because if you had meaningful age verification, if you did what you could do, I mean, these are like, you have Google, right? You have Meta, you have some of the largest companies in the world. If they wanted to make sure a 13-year-old or 14-year-old were not mixed in this way with an adult, they could do it. Mm-hmm. But if they did that, they would instantaneously cut their market share. The companies would be worth less because other companies, less scrupulous companies, say Snapchat, would not do that. And then people would flock over there. So the point is, you have this mix, and you have the initial lure, or as you're saying, where the predator reaches out and touches the kid. What happens at that point? Like, what were some of the things that you guys saw that repeated themselves over and over? Obviously, there's an aspect of having a lure. So you have like, oh, my dog died, and you strike up a conversation like, oh, I'm so mad at my mom, and or my dad's so controlling. So you get this emotional connection. You have things like that. How does it progress for people? Like, what are things that you could start? What are things that parents should be aware of or start looking for as their kids are engaging on social media? Because most people will not take the route that it seems you would take or I'm taking, which is abstinence. Most people are saying, hey, look, I got to function in the real world with my kid. My kid's going to want social media eventually, and I'm not going to prevent them from having that entirely. But what are the things that people should start looking for that are kind of warning signs or telltale activities that indicate there's a problem?
Okay. So really 2 jump to mind for me. One is the predator who's pretending to be another kid on a gaming site, generally, or through some other social media interaction, so they can have that conversation like, hey, you're 12, I'm 12, and they have the conversation. Generally what they'll do is they'll entice the kid over to another platform where they can kind of hide their behavior. They'll do live cam with the kid. They'll do stuff where they'll use sextortion. The kid will show her breast or something like that, and then they'll hold it against them. So you'll see that kind of predatory behavior. The other side of it is what we see for human trafficking, specifically for where folks entice kids to basically move away from their social structures over towards them. And generally, it's an older male, usually. Sometimes it's females as well. And it's what we call boyfriending. And so they will be someone that the kid looks up to. They're cool. They have nice shoes. They have a nice car. They have some stuff, and there's some enticement to like, hey, you want to hang out? You want to follow me? You want to hang out with me? And they'll invite them to a party. They'll invite them to a club. They'll invite them to whatever. The kid who's young, who's not at that age, but tries to pull it off. Basically, gets out of the house, goes, meets with whomever that person is, and they basically tried to build them up. And the old approach, and it's still the same approach on social media, just it's a different platform than in person, is basically, you're better than your circumstances allow you to be. Basically, I can be the one to lift you up. I can bring you up. I can make you into something, more of what you are if you stick with me. And so it's the basic method of control at that point in time. It jumps off of social media at that point. Now we're talking personal engagement, conversations, text messages on the phone, and interactions and meeting somebody. Maybe getting the kid high, maybe getting the kid drunk, whatever the circumstances, or maybe not, or maybe simply hooking them up. In the cases that I've worked in human trafficking, there is that point where it becomes a physical connection between individuals. It is no longer simply an online connection. It becomes a physical connection. In some cases, for other countries around the globe, one of the methods is job offers for individuals from different countries. They go and they move, they take a flight that's paid for, they get to the United States, or they get to whatever country is the landing point. Their identity documents are taken away, and they're basically subjugated at that point in time. In the United States, a little more on the angle, less on the angle of that kind of force tactic, more on the angle of basically what we call boyfriending. Most of the time, where there's a relationship that's formed fairly quickly, it becomes sexualized, the relationship itself. There is an expectation pretty quickly put it there that, okay, now you're with me, now you need to bring something to the table. You need to basically do something, and it's an inching process of getting some, like a girl to go, she becomes a waitress in a strip joint. I need dancers, I don't need waitresses. You want to keep your job, why don't you just get up on stage, you don't have to take your clothes off, and then it starts to roll. Of course they're going to, and that's the expectation of the trafficker. Or the expectation that, you're going to come in and you're going to hang out with me and everyone else is going to bring money to the table, and I would expect you to meet with a client. I would expect you to do that. And it starts going into the sexual area. Labor trafficking, more so, it would be an internet advertisement for a job. Come overseas, turns out it's not the case. Take away their documents, an expectation that, if you want your stuff back, if you want to fit in here, if you want to belong, you need to you need to work, you need to pay for stuff. It's an expectation there. And so I'm hitting on a lot of different ways it happens, and there's many more, but it basically becomes a physical situation for the most part. There's a few who do, the video voyeurism stuff. They'll charge per minute for someone to, act sexual on
Sure.
video. There's some of that. But for the most part, it's actually the physical stuff, because what it requires ultimately for human trafficking, and this is key, is control. Human trafficking is all about control. Controlling another human being to the point where you basically make them your property. And you put them on a route to they just do everything for you. That's what human trafficking ultimately is, whether it's labor or whether it's sex or whatever it is. And that level of control leads to money for the individual who's trafficking. Simple. Those are the two things. There's a little bit of ego in trafficking in terms of, I've got a whole bunch of women in my stable, which is literally what they call it, because they're treated as cattle, basically. But most of it is money. And so for us, when we're looking at it, we look at basically, how do they get into the life? What keeps them in the life? What are all the dynamics that keep someone who's a victim of trafficking in the life? And then what are the things that are preventing them from leaving, from getting out of it? And it can definitely start in the social media realm as the intro, but there are other ways that it starts too.
What are the things that keep them in it?
It depends on who it is. It's not a monolith. You have individuals who feel that there's countries in the world where prostitution is legal, and they're like, oh, nobody is trafficked. Almost nobody is. It's all very much, empowering, and they want to do it, and this is what they're going to do. And then other places where it's all illegal, and, there's more of a sense of anyone who is involved in anywhere in the sex trades, any kind at all, must be trafficked, because there's no way they would do it otherwise. I think, in my experience working with other task forces around the country and the things that we see, it's hard to judge because people don't always give you their true, they don't always speak truth to that, so it's hard to judge. But I would say it's a band of gray. You have individuals, there are a few individuals who are actually independents who do something because they want to do it. But I would say the majority, it's their, there's little choice or no choice in what they're doing. But they stay in it because it's a world they've gotten to know. It's a world where there's a lot of fear of getting out, through physical victimization, through threats to family members, to children, threats of exposure to their kids. All the manipulative tactics that traffickers use to keep someone under their thumb so that person keeps making money for the trafficker. And there's no depth that they won't go to do that.
with sextortion in particular, and this is something that has been really jumped into the national conversation, because it's so shocking that you have all of a sudden, like 16-year-old boys committing suicide, and it's a scam to some degree, as I've heard it described, that's unlike any others, because 20 years ago, there was not much you really worried about boys with. It's like, look, you got a 15, 16-year-old boy, like, we know to protect our girls. We've always protected our women, and that's plain as day. But the scams come against men now, young men, enticing them with pornography, potential for, intimacy or meeting up with people. And then, of course, getting exposing media, things like that. That's the nature of sextortion. But are you seeing, is there human trafficking related to social media that affects boys in the same way that it affects girls?
I think absolutely. I think, when you look at boys in terms of sextortion, it doesn't matter who they are. If they get caught up into something where they're showing, revealing a photograph of themselves to someone who is not who they thought it was, and then they're extorted for money, you send me a few $100 and I'll, make this go away, kind of thing. Anyone can be victimized by that, because let's be honest, teenage boys, we're not that bright, and we're really proud of everything we got. And so we'll put our photographs out there like idiots, basically. And so it's easy to see how kids get into that. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, I'll never live this down, because I'm a teenager and I don't have the benefit of hindsight of an adult who realizes that this too shall pass. They don't live in that world. We do. And so they're very easy to victimize. In addition to that, though, what we've seen in human trafficking is trafficking of men and boys who are gay, who are transgender, all these other areas and there's a strong reluctance for them to come forward. There's a very strong reluctance for girls and women to come forward. It is not something that anyone that I've met who is a trafficking victim is proud of. It's not something that they want to tell the world. It's not something they want to tell a jury or a judge. It's just not. And for boys and for men, it's even more like that, in my estimation, based on my interactions. None of this is scientific, by the way. This is me talking to victims, basically. But from my experience in that, it is very difficult for them to talk about it. It's very difficult for folks to come forward and say, look, this happened to me, kind of thing. It's the same as, sexual abuse of girls and boys. I mean, there's a dynamic there. There are statistics. There are people much smarter than I who've developed those over the years, and they understand that it's very difficult. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just means it's not reported, and that's the hard part, I think. And so I look at it in terms of with kids on social media. Let's say they realize they were duped, or they did something they shouldn't have done, or they physically met somebody, or they had sex, or they got paid for sex, or they were whatever the level of wherever we're at, it doesn't matter. How do you make it accessible so that kids can come forward and talk to you? How do you make it so that they can come to their support structures and talk to their folks and talk to their pastor, talk to their teacher, talk to whoever it is who they trust as an adult, who is a rational adult, who's not trying to get something over on them? And there's a lot of us out there, in society and communities. How do we get them to be able to do that? And where that starts in my book is at home. That's where that all starts. My advice was always for folks when I would do talks on human trafficking, develop your kids' self-esteem. Develop the communication that there's nothing they can tell you that you're going to be so irate, so angry, so over the top, anything that they can't tell you. Because as soon as they feel that level of pushback, they'll clam up. And you won't get to understand what was going on or what is going on, be able to prevent it or be able to do something about it. So you have to have that open communication. And I mean, it's a thing that we even do, as obviously as law enforcement, we talk to people. That's what we do. We talk to victims, we talk to witnesses, we talk to suspects, we talk to everybody. And if we don't have some semblance of being able to get people to be willing to talk to us, we're not going to be successful. And I take that as a father for my kids, the same thing. How do I bring them in so that they feel like, hey, if I tell dad this, he's not going to be angry at me. He's going to listen and he's going to help me work through it. It's a simple thing, but it's a tough thing. Parents know to do that.
So the idea is essentially in order to, there's a lot to be said for limiting technology in your house. And you know, that's not really the focus of what we're talking about, but to the degree that people realize, okay, look, technology will be in the house, be it school administered technology, personal technological devices, whatever they might be. It sounds like a great antidote, or at least a check against some of the worst aspects of the tech world, is better communication and open lines. In the event that they get in trouble with something, in the event, and Officer Gomez in the program we worked on said, hey, look, it's not a question of when, or excuse me, if. It's a question of just when. If you have a teen boy with a cell phone, someone is going to try to sextort him. People could be trying to sextort him, you know, every week, every day. I get text messages all the day, all the time. One thing that I actually emphasize parents do that I'd actually like your opinion on is to train my kids to be safe with this stuff. And again, they don't have tech, but they're going to get it eventually. I save screenshots of the phishing scams. And I, in fact, engage in the scams that, you know, it's like, hey, Cheryl, I'll meet you at the airport to pick you up. And it's like, oh, no, this isn't Cheryl. Oh, my gosh, thank you so much. And again, this dumb conversation starts. And that's how, you know, that's how the phishing scams work with young men. So I actually engage in these conversations down to the point where they start sending me photos of themselves. And of course, you know, blur that part out and the conversation ends. But I screen record this, or excuse me, take screenshots. And then I show my son, like, look, this is how these conversations start. And I'll show him multiple different iterations. And my 12-year-old now can spot a scam like that, like he spots poison oak. He's like, hey, this is the same thing. It's like by accident, and then they're super nice. They're overly nice. There's no reason for somebody to be this gracious. You didn't do anything that great. Helping them have that. So communication with them. So in the event, when it happens to them, they can come to you. Is there anything else? Is there any training? Like, I try to train my kids, but it's going to be so different every day.
Yeah. And I think everyone has to, you know, gauge their kid. You know, you don't want to just spend your entire life scaring your kid. Like everything, you know, there's a boogeyman everywhere kind of thing. You don't want to be the adult. You want to be the helicopter parent who's constantly protecting them so they can't learn to be critical thinkers and make their own decisions and think critically and protect themselves. We do that physically, you know, teach your kids how to fight, teach your girls how to fight, teach your girls how to shoot, that kind of thing. To me, it empowers them. It gives them one more tool in their tool belt to be able to use as long as you do it responsibly. But also how to communicate, how to not, and this is something that you see a lot, you know, as they grow up, how to not have it so that some other friend, their issue becomes your issue. How to separate that off. So, and I would ask, you know, I'll ask my daughter. She's like, well, you know, this person came to us and, you know, said, we had a problem with that person. I'm like, we or you or someone else? Well, someone else, but you were standing there. Yeah. So how is that we? How does that person's drama become your drama? It isn't. And she's like, I guess not. Just, I mean, it's simple stuff that we as adults, because we have experience, we know these things, and these issues come up, but you have to have that conversation. And it's tough for some parents because they're not communicating with their kids. Their kids are on social media the whole time. They're playing video games, they're watching TV, but they're not communicating. And really, to me, you have to just eliminate the social media so you can actually communicate. You have to take out all the noise so that they can hear you. And so that's a simple approach. It's not an easy approach for some parents, and I get that. You know, it's not easy, but neither is most parenting. And it's really not easy when your kid falls into a hole and you can't dig them out. And it's really not easy when your kid's actually trafficked, and it's really not easy when they run away. And it's really not easy in the cases that I worked, where your kid could come up hurt or dead. And so it's one of those things that, you know, a little preventative medicine is a good idea. And some of that preventative medicine requires communication. I mean, it's so simple, but the kids are online looking for a social network when they have one at home, when they have one at school, when they have one at whatever activities they're involved in. Outside, for us growing up back when I was a kid in New York, out on the street with the other kids, There is an actual social network that exists there that can be examined, that can be used. It doesn't have to be online. It just doesn't have to be. And I get COVID, got in the way of that and people wanted to distance themselves, but that's done. Time to move on, quite frankly, and move back to the basics of real interactions. And I think it's, I think in the end, it's more fulfilling for them and for you. It's more satisfying for everybody to have real interactions, and it makes that easier. And then it develops a pattern of communication where kids can talk to you. And when it gets rough, when they lie to you, when they hide something from you and you call them out on it, there is a resolution to that. They don't get disowned because they made a small mistake when they were small kids. They learn how not to do that because they do that interaction with you. So it's a process. The short answer, don't use social media. There's nothing positive that kids are going to get out of social media. Nothing. Why can't they just talk to another kid in person? Or like we used to do on the phone with the short cord, from the kitchen that was attached to the wall.
with a ball of knots on that stupid pigtail thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. In some of the presentations that I do with Gomez, one of the big emphasis that parents all the time talk about, hey, you have no idea what it's like because all my kid's friends are on social media. And it kills me because it's like, okay, they're on social media. The friends are on social media because that's where the kid is. Okay. I was on the swim team. I was in band. I was on the wrestling team. Guess where my friends were? On the swim team, in band, on the wrestling team. Like you take your kids to I have an 8-year-old who's very gregarious, surprise, outgoing kid. We take him to this climbing wall and he makes friends with everyone at the climbing wall. Now, mind you, is he a good climber? No, but he's cheering people on. He's talking to the gal who helped him with his, harness.
Is he a good climber? No.
Well, he's also 8 and he's 135 pounds.
Yeah.
So he's not built like a climber. He's built like the wall. So it's like,
so he might as well talk to kids.
Yeah.
No, I see that.
Like he loves it and he gets better at it.
Yeah.
He'll never be, he will never be? He will never be Sylvester Stallone from Cliffhanger. You remember that movie in the 80s, 90s, whatever? Yeah. That was such a cool movie. I was like, I want to be that guy. Anyway.
You want to ice climb with no shirt on.
Oh my God. Like a gangster. So but that's where his friends are. It's like, I understand you might find yourself in a position where you look at your present state and say, okay, my child's friends are in this place, but this place is also dangerous.
Yeah.
It's also dangerous. And if we were in a physical world like that and you had your kid hanging out physically in a location that was dangerous, you'd be like, you got to find some new friends. We're going somewhere else.
So just on that particular note, I mean, that is what any police officer in the United States tells any drug addict or any drug dealer or whatever when you arrest them and they try to get off the stuff and they are on probation or whatever their circumstances and they're trying to get clean. And the first thing we tell them and the last thing we tell them is get rid of your social network, which is all the knuckleheads that who are using drugs too. And it's tough for them to do. And we understand that. And we tell them that. We get that it's difficult because those are the people who and are in your same lane, but you have to make a choice. And it's the same thing we tell adults. And why can't we tell kids that? Why can't we set that standard over there? Because a bad group of friends leads nothing except to bad things. And a group of friends in terms of social media, maybe they're not bad kids who you're interacting with, but there's other ways to do it. There's just other ways.
And the mechanism of communication is bad. Even if you and I are friends and we're hanging out on Snapchat having a good time, Snapchat is not interested in cultivating the best relationships for me in the world.
They don't care less. No, they want to just connect you with what you demonstrate as interest so they can sell to you more individuals who move towards your proclivity.
Right. Or sell you to those individuals.
To someone else. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's for me, a whole nother topic on the sales aspect of it. This is all about selling to you and selling you to other people. If you want to get down and dirty on a virtual world, that's all it is. You're a product. If any service that you're using, we all use Gmail and all those things, is free, it ain't free. There's always a payment there. And the payment is generally who you are to individuals who pay the highest price to learn that and advertise to you or worse.
You know what's interesting about this concept? When The Social Dilemma came out and made that point, that documentary film, whatever it was, made the point that it's like, look, you're the product. People lost their minds over this. They were like, I'm the product? Oh my gosh. It's like, what did you think was happening on Saturday morning cartoons? Like your kid gets 5 minutes of cartoon and then 3 minutes of commercials. Like, what did you think was happening?
Yeah.
You've been sold a million times over before we got to social media. The problem with social media is it sells you to nefarious individuals, right? Like the things that you get sold on the radio, the things you like, that's regulated by the FCC. I talked to somebody just the other day. He used to have weight loss clinics and the FCC came after him because Jenny Craig and Weight Watcher, he was like taking market share and they like, you know, came down on him. They're like, hey, you've been advertising this thing. Like you can't do that. We have all these strict rules.
Yeah.
There were accepted guidelines and safeguards to who and how you were sold in our classic media consumption paradigms. That all went out the window. It's like, no. Now I'm going to sell you, the individual, adult or kid, to whoever wants you.
Yeah. It used to be that you learned how to not listen to commercials.
Right.
That was the method in my household. We would watch the cartoon and then there would be something for a sweet cereal on and there would be some this and some that, whatever it was, whatever toy they wanted to sell.
Right.
And we learned in my family growing up that, you know, commercials are just trying to sell you. That was the going rule basically. And so you learn as an adult, you might like the jingle. I can sure pull off plenty of jingles that I remember because they're implanted deeply in my brain, but I don't buy the stuff, you know. I don't eat McDonald's, even though I know that, you know, like or Burger King, the have it your way one, you know, that kind of stuff. It's like, you know, the jingle, but that doesn't mean you buy it. Now you're the product.
And when that McDonald's, when they revamped the jingle in like 2005, I was working with a bunch of elementary and middle school kids, and they actually asked me to do a presentation on manipulation versus persuasion because I was a rhetoric major. I really enjoy persuading people and communicating. But I was like, the distinction is McDonald's literally gets you to repeat, I love this. Like that's the whole point of the jingle. They're not saying da 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 da. You love it because that would elicit a do I not? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's literally I'm loving it. Like just repeat that over and over.
Oh yeah. And I have a coworker who is every day I hear in the office da 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 da. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Because it's in his brain and it's in my brain too. But that doesn't mean I eat McDonald's fries every day because you know all the health issues obviously that kill you.
Yeah. God, it's true. But and again, the people, the other flip side of it is I understand the nature of commercials. I understand the nature of social media. And like, I actually unfollowed everybody that I enjoyed watching on social media. And I enjoyed watching like random street food in India. Like if some guy has a bucket with green stuff and he's like slapping it, like I can't look away. And I know this of myself. So I unfollow all of these things. I'm like, don't, right? And I understand that exchange, but the real flip to me came with dealing with parenting, which is, hey, I know if I'm going to watch 10 minutes of dumb Indian street food videos, I understand there's an exchange here and I have sold my 10 minutes, I've traded, but I didn't conceptualize trading my kids. And that's what I was doing. They used to have iPads and they didn't have iPads pre-COVID. Yeah. COVID hit, we had to get them iPads. We weren't a tech family and video game family beforehand, even though I love video games, like big fan. It wasn't something that was part of our life. Then we all traded it. Like we all traded our kids in for the convenience of education and other things.
Yes.
And that stuck culturally, I think, with a lot more people than would have done it otherwise. And that is the exchange. That's the nature of it. If you're a parent and you have your kid on an iPad who's saying, hey, can I get this app? It's free. You're trading your child for that app. That's what's happening.
Yeah. I've seen kids, you know, my kids who have peers who are in like, you know, elementary school who have their own TikTok platform, their own Instagram platform, their YouTube stars. I'm like, how is that even a thing? How you as a responsible, relatively smart adult think that basically your kid performing for whoever is a good idea and that you really think you can control that? There's just nothing about that makes sense. To me, it's the same as, 6-year-old beauty queens. Sorry to all the people who love their 6-year-old beauty queens, but that's fraught with problems.
Didn't work out for JonBenet Ramsey.
Didn't work out for her at all. It doesn't work out for children to make them into adults. It just doesn't work. They're not adults. It takes a long time for their brains to develop. We all understand that and appreciate that when it comes to protecting our kids against certain things. And we completely throw that out the window when it comes to convenience on other things, in terms of our kids. And you have to be consistent. If you have a principle that your kid needs to be able to grow into the adult they're going to be, then you need to engender that. You need to be consistent about that. And sometimes they're not going to like it. Guess what? You're not their friend, you're their parent, kind of thing. And I know for many parents, I'm preaching to the choir, and all the difficulties and all. I mean, we have those same issues where the school district wants all their information blasted out every day in class, photographs and all. It's like, what are you doing? Why are you? It's like for a pedophile, it's a candy store. That's what you're doing by doing that. And they really need to temper that down. You need to get, I think, back to basics. Make it simple. It doesn't have to be, the parent doesn't have to have instant photographs 20 a day of their kid in classroom interacting. Have a conversation with the kid and find out what the kid's perspective on that was. What did you do today? Oh, and then what happened? And then what happened? It's a simple conversation. The kids learn to storytell. They learn to communicate. They learn to share because you asked them a question, not that you saw something and that satisfied your need to understand that they were working on math or something. Ask them about it.
Man, Mike, you and I view education in particular and how to deal with young people in tech very similarly. I just feel like there's so much of our community that's captured by this, and you've seen the darkest aspects of it. And
and it's sad. It's sad seeing this, with parents, parents of runaways, parents of kids who were abducted, parents of kids who, commit suicide, been down those roads. Not fun. There's nothing about that they'll ever fully heal from. And it's in some ways it's knowable. In some ways there's something that can be done about it. Can you always do something? No. In my career as a violent crimes detective, tons of suicides that I've dealt with, hundreds literally. It's very difficult for the survivors of a suicide to deal with it. Either they knew and they couldn't stop it, or they didn't know and they were blindsided by it and they felt like they should have known and they should have stopped it. No matter what you do, you're going to second guess. And for parents of juveniles who've done that, of adolescents who've done that, in cases that I've had, that I've been the lead on, it's horrendous. It's horrific. And you have to do what you can, and the parents do what they can. They do all kinds of things. They try every hoop-de-loop, and really it comes down to, and I think we're moving in that direction, some more resources for that. And the resources start, though, with bringing in the parents, educating them so that they have some level of competence to deal with these things, because we don't learn that. We never learned that in school, I remember home economics. That was a course. I don't know if it's still a course, but it was back in my day. And it was like, how to do this and how to do that, but it wasn't really on economics. It wasn't really on how to, keep your financial security where it needs to be. It wasn't don't rely on credit cards. It wasn't any of those things, even though those were the main issue. And with kids now with social media, we're in the same kind of zone. It's like, what are we giving parents as tools so they can actually do a better job of it, so they can perceive things, they can see things, they can respond to them. When we teach about human trafficking, we teach people to look for the signs of someone who is disassociated from, their world. Their behavior is changing. They appear depressed. All these different things are going on. They're missing for a period of time. They're coming back. All these different signs that we see for trafficking. And, there's a lot of very smart people out there who also know about the signs for social media and ICAC and the levels of abuse from internet crimes against children and the pornography and all those things. They see the change in that. They see all these things. But I think we need to simplify it and better educate parents so they have tools to combat it, because all the money in the world towards programs helps, but the programs need to, the core of that are the parents.
It's always the parents.
Yeah.
The parents, and over the last year, and again, I'm not a law enforcement agent. I've been working very closely with Officer Gomez to understand this and try to make a program for people. But it always, one of the main things is in contemplating, like, how have we come to this point? And it always comes back to the parents. It's like parents know how to keep their kids safe at a park. Parents know how to keep their kids safe in Costco. Parents know how to keep their kids safe when they're teaching them how to drive, which is horrific and horrifying, right?
Being the passenger seat.
Yeah, right. You know how to keep your kids safe because you understand the risk.
Yes.
And I deeply believe if more people understand the real risk of social media, they understand the real risk of these cell phones and these apps that are designed to look fun and have smiley faces and these things. If they understand the real risks here, they will naturally change. We will naturally change behavior because it's literally like you're teaching somebody how to drive a car and they don't know how dangerous the car is.
Yes.
Right? Or they're like, oh, this is Costco. It should be safe. Go on in there, a 6-year-old, and like hang out for an hour. Like that's effectively, it's even scarier than that in my mind in a lot of internet places. So it's just helping people understand, no, this is dangerous. Yeah. Now act accordingly as a parent.
Yeah. And that's the hard part is that it's so prevalent. There's peer pressure on the kids because, well, the other kids do it. And as a parent, I don't care. I don't care. You know, what I perceive based on my, dark experience, being a cop, being a detective, informs me. And I know and I understand most of the risks that are out there. No one knows them all. No one can see around every corner. But I know enough to know that it's not a good thing. And so you start to set boundaries, you start to set expectations. And I think ultimately it comes down to empower the parents. And the parents and everyone who's a good person around your kid, empower your kids. If you want to keep them from being trafficked, build up their self-esteem. Because classic trafficker is not a rocket scientist. They just play the law of averages. And they'll watch kids interacting and they'll look for the one who's off to the side, the one who is not quite part of the group, the one who wants to be but isn't. That's the approach. They call it the knock. When they walk over and they say, hey, you're pretty, automatically feeding that lack of self-esteem. And that's where it begins. And it happens the same way on social media, on these platforms. There's an interaction and there's an enticement going on there. And you need to be able to build up that kid's self-esteem so that they're like some of the other ones who, when someone comes up, they see through the BS and they go away. That's the best inoculation you can have, is training your kids to have an understanding of themselves. And that takes a long time. That takes your entire parenting. It's not like it's a thing you do. You can't just go to the doc when they're a year old and give them a shot. It's not the same. You have to just do it in a process, but it has to be done because we all want our kids to, thrive and survive and have good, well-adjusted lives. We want to have them become great parents with great kids, or whatever it is that your plan is for your kid. You want them to have a good life. And the more self-doubt they have, the more insecurities they have, the more, fears that they have, the less they're able to do that. And so this feeds into a basic premise for kids, with suicide, kids with substance abuse issues, kids with, having, all kinds of emotional turmoil inside. There's kids who really have significant, serious physical issues that have to be dealt with. That's separate. But for everyone else, I like to say, like, we have people in Boise who, you go to a burglary at their house or something like that. And I had this one person who was like, well, I realized they came in and they stole all my stuff, but, I just like living in a happy place and I won't lock my doors. And I'm like, don't make it easy for them. Car jockey boxing, burglaries, we'll see 10 along a street. And pretty much all of them, there's no broken glass. It's they left the door unlocked and they left something on the seat. Don't make it easy for bad guys and gals to go after your kid. Don't make them work for it. They don't like to work hard. Make them work for it.
Mike Miraglia.
Yes, there you go.
I appreciate you. I really appreciate your time. I know you got a lot going on. Is there anything we've missed?
No, I mean, I think there's a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack, in terms of human trafficking itself. But it's just, it just comes down to, pay attention to your kids, be there, and don't give them that face. Don't give them the look when they tell you something that's probably freaking you out, but you need to not show that, because as soon as they see that or they see disapproval, they stop talking.
Can I tell you something? What you just said, very serious, awesome, got it. Takes me back to when I had my oldest was in diapers, and somebody told me, they're like, you should always smile when you're changing the diaper. I'm like, what? They're like, listen, psychologists have studied this. I'm like, wait, what are you saying to me? And they're like, listen, if you open the diaper to a huge load and you make a face, then your child thinks that you're ashamed of his genitalia. I'm like, he just crapped himself. He's 6 months old. Like, is this not? It was a funny thing, man. But yeah, like I think they were applying a more nuanced and perceptive individual situation to changing a dirty diaper, which is not the same thing.
But I think it's human nature. People respond to that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
Adults or kids.
Yeah, for sure.
Funny, gross at the same time.
Oh, dude, it was so bad. I remember there, I was like, okay, well, you change the diaper and keep a smile on your face.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for coming. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for what you're doing for Boise.
You bet.